Hello, I'm Felicity Cohen. I'm so excited to introduce you to my Wellness Warriors podcast. For over 20 years, I've been a passionate advocate for helping thousands of Australians find solutions to treating obesity and health-related complications through surgical intervention and holistic managed care. My podcast is dedicated to all the people, past, present and future, who have helped shape my journey and continue to inspire me to work consistently to achieve a healthier Australia in both adults and future generations. I hope you enjoy it. Good morning, Andrew.
Great to be here, Felicity.
Thank you. So one of the subjects that we've been really interested in talking about recently and having these conversations is around how financial health relates to health and well-being and, post weight loss. What's the impact of having a surgical procedure and how does that look like when we're talking about improving your financial health and well-being?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously I've got a big passion when it comes to helping everyday Australians achieve the two great Australian dreams of owning their own home and retiring comfortably. And obviously there's been a big shift even from a regulatory point of view and a government point of view, and certainly something that you've been passionate about is trying to get people to see the correlation between health and wealth, and obviously and weight loss is a big component of that, and probably. I think this conversation that we're going to have today covers off on a number of aspects, from mindset to the actual physicality and the practicality of starting a business and also the confidence, but also, things like insurances and things of that nature.
So some of the things that I've actually become aware of over the last 10 years, and it took me the first 10 years to get to this point, was a patient who came in to see me. She was really severely morbidly obese, and her job at that stage before surgery was she sat behind a sewing machine and she moved from the sewing machine to the ironing board behind her. That was it. She didn't move. And then post-surgery and post all this weight loss, she was able to not just do things like bungee jumping in New Zealand, but all of a sudden she went for the job promotion, there were career changes, and then from that it became, well, actually I'm now capable of creating my own financial health and well-being that I've never seen as a possibility for myself. So she started to invest in property.
Yes.
Okay. And that has been the journey that came from this severely morbidly obese person having this massive transformation and shift in life to all of a sudden thinking about how does my weight loss equate to my financial health and well-being, and how's that changed my life?
Yes.
And it really struck me as something that we don't look at, that we don't talk about. We don't actually understand that there's a significant link between the two.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you think have changed for you in terms of your own professional career? Yes, you were hugely successful before surgery. But do you think that you're able to take that success to a whole new level? And has your mindset changed around financial health and well-being?
Yeah, definitely. Like as I've mentioned in previous interviews and time I've spent with you, one of the probably when we had the conversation around the surgery, one of the big things you that had gravitas in what you said you're making all this money, but are you going to live long enough to spend it? And so like that was trigger number one, and it's a very 2D perspective of looking at it, but it's a reality. So I think anyone who's looking at this, if you are either an entrepreneur or a business owner, or you're in the corporate sector, or you're PAYG, whatever it might be, you are working towards the goal of retirement and enjoying that retirement. But then the flip side of it, which I probably didn't struggle with as much, but as you know, I'm a big advocate of what you do, and I've sent a lot of people your way, and I continue to do that and advocate for it because I believe in it. I've seen a shift in them, like them go from being a corporate machine to I'm going to go start my own business now, and you can see that subconscious and conscious mindset shift when it comes to their business. And then I didn't even think about it, but when you mentioned before this lady had bought property, it's so true, because see, once you start to make that lifestyle shift and that lifestyle change, you start to go, okay, it's important for me to start thinking about my future because I'm going to live longer. It's the irony of it, but it's the truth.
What about, if we think about just the real estate sector, something that you're very passionate about, that obviously you know better than anybody, when we're talking about your colleagues and people who are employed throughout the real estate sector, where do you think their problems are that they may not even be aware of, that they're overweight, they're struggling, family life's compromised, but they're also compromised in their careers right now? What kind of message would you give to them?
Look, it's sad but positive at the same time. But like, especially in the real estate world, if you're in the industry, it is very much an image-based industry. I've tried to stem away from that slightly. Like, I still try and I've always tried to present myself well, but I've tried to stem away from it in a sense that I try and advocate that you don't need to have a flashy car and think about, you know, the mum and dad. But it is a very image-based industry, and obviously, you know, calling auctions, if you're calling auctions and you're sweating and you can't sustain the energy and keep that high intensity level of energy, or when you're negotiating and there's a lot of late nights and things of that nature. So the stamina opportunity, whether you're in real estate or any professional field, that stamina opportunity is a massive opportunity, but probably, you know, that the perception of other people, the way you're perceived by other people, it is a big thing. So, you know, like when someone's making a decision to sell their house, and real estate is solely an example, like it can be any industry, but when someone's interviewing multiple people in whatever industry to make a decision, they are looking at all aspects of that. They're looking at, is this person engaged in their community? Is this person, you know, married and settled down? Like, often a lot of people miss out on business because they're young and they're still running a bit of a mark, and they've got their Instagram going. You can see them partying every weekend, and potential vendors or potential clients are looking at these sorts of things. But if they're going on your social media and they're seeing you online and they're seeing you on your profiles and they see that you're doing, you know, for example, marathons or Kokoda or Kinabalu or Everest, and they're like, well, I want to be doing business with someone like that. So there's a massive shift there, and as well, the reality, whether you like it or not, is we still do live in a bit of, it's not as bad as, say, you know, the American culture where it's very superficial, but, you know, a lot of the time people are looking, they're going, okay, well, if this person doesn't take the time, energy, effort to take pride in the way that they look, then are they going to be able to give 110%? If they don't know you, then they're going to be like, they are making that judgment based on the way you look and the way you present yourself. Yeah.
I'm a great believer in, you know, walking the talk and leading by example. I think it's so important, and I love, you know, for me, yes, I'm part of that 5 a.m. club. I love to get up and run. I feel better and I'm more productive in my working life and in my career, but that comes across in terms of the message that I, for patients as well. And, you know, my team at the Gold Coast Marathon this year was 100.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And the change in people and how they feel about themselves, their self-esteem, and how that has changed their perception around what they're actually capable of, where they can go next, what they can do. And those physical kind of success stories also equate to better opportunities in life in general. I think that's really important. I know that, you know, when you're working with the Entourage, I often see Jack, you know, he's someone who really walks the talk and talks about that getting up early in the morning and exercising as being part of life. But then we see this totally, I guess, contradiction in terms in a professional world, whether it be accountants, real estate agents, banking, whatever sector of you know, entrepreneurship that we're looking at, that there are so many people who are held back by their weight concerns and putting their health last.
Yeah, I think it becomes, and you know, it was a great point you mentioned Jack and I's business, the Entourage. There is a massive culture. Like yesterday morning we had a board meeting, and the first thing that our general manager Tim Morris said was, he goes, "Who trained this morning?" You know, and we all put up our hands, and we'd all trained, and there's a culture of that. Yeah. So if you look at a young, dynamic, successful company like the Entourage or Yellow Brick Road or things some of the companies that I'm involved in, there is a now. If you're not the person, and this is a big thing, so if you're somebody who is not taking action with regard to either your weight or your health and your future, and then leading back to your wealth, whether being through a business that you're already a part of or being entrepreneurial, the reality is that you're getting left behind. And there's going to be an element in this next generation. I think they've got I'm sort of certainly not an ageist, but I think there is that baby boomer generation, and even even people sort of that 40 to 50, they sort of get away with it a little bit. Now with this new generation, it's like if you smoke, people look at you. If you drink too much, people look at you. If you're not training, people are like, why don't you train? If you're not healthy, and it's to some extent, right now living in eastern suburb Sydney, like it's become probably a little bit extreme to the point where people have like forgotten even to have a good time in these days because they're all about, I want to Instagram the fact that I'm training and all that. It's become an Instagram thing. But the reality is that in this modern culture that we're in now, if you're not tying some sort of health concept into what you're doing, from a business point of view, it's going to be detrimental. From a health point of view, it's obviously detrimental. But I think from a market point of view, it's detrimental. And you actually become, to a certain extent, in a lot of businesses now, ostracised. Like a lot of, working in Sydney CBD, you'll see most lunchtimes now people are, all got their socks pulled up and their, little jerseys on, and there's mixed sex soccer teams, and they all go play soccer in the Centennial Park or
really?
It's a big thing now. So it's like, and if you're not a part of something like that now, or if you go on a work retreat and you're the person who doesn't go on the 10K hike in the morning, or when we went on the Entourage retreat, obviously it's different. They're entrepreneurs, they're highly motivated with, businesses doing $1 million to $10 million plus sort of revenue. But like every morning we did meditation, and we had a running club. Tim Morris ran a running club, our general manager, Jack and myself did meditation. We had someone run, one of our other execs run a yoga class. And it's basically, if you didn't come, you were like, when you walked into breakfast, people were like, where were you? Like, it's like you're not part of the social clique anymore. And I'm not doing that to ostracize anyone, but it's become a reality now. There's an expectation that that's part of the culture that you buy into.
I totally, I love that and buy into that whole cultural movement around what's important within your organisation to drive better culture in your business, and how that equates to better outcomes with your staff, how they feel about themselves and what they're achieving in business. I think you've touched on something else though, and one of the reasons why I think it's so important that yoga, meditation, exercise have become so prevalent is that we live in a very stressful world, and stress management has become so important. But with that, it's also mental health.
100%.
Mental health has become something that we're far more willing to talk about, that it is part of our lives. We live in a pressure cooker world.
We do.
And I think, if you're not doing things like that, you're not managing your stress. So
definitely.
It's also not just how that relates to your productivity every day, but you've got to be able to manage those stress levels. Let's think a bit more about mental health. If you're not exercising and you're not managing your mental health as well, you're not achieving. And that is going to have a flow-on effect to every single aspect of life, whether it's your financial health and well-being or just your general day-to-day enjoyment and fulfillment of life in general.
Definitely.
So what are your thoughts around mental health and how we should best manage ourselves?
Look, I've done quite a bit of work over the years with different mental health groups. My sister runs the Jealous Craig Foundation for our real estate business in Melbourne, and one of the people we donate to is Origin, which is for mental health. So it has always been something that's very, very important to us. I haven't suffered. I've had periods of induced anxiety, probably from the pressure that I put myself under, and certainly the weight loss has certainly helped with that, and now being able to go get on a treadmill and do 15 kilometres and just, whether it's walking or jogging or running or whatever it might be, or going to do a session with a personal trainer, it's certainly straight away I know that from a scientific point of view, the endorphins that it's letting off and the serotonin increase and things of that nature has certainly helped with stress management. But I've worked with a lot of friends that have suffered from mental health issues, and sending them down that path of getting on top of their weight management, getting on top of their physicality, getting actually out there, and it breaks my heart when people think that the first option is to go get antidepressants, and I'm like, well, no, it's not, or Valium so they can sleep better, or Xanax, or whatever it might be, and I'm like, have you tried getting active? Have you tried? If you're feeling that you're lethargic, or that you're unable to cope with the stresses of the day-to-day life, why don't we look at 2 or 3 other options, whether that is weight management or yoga or personal training and things. And I'm not discrediting or undermining, obviously, that some people, there is an absolute genuine chemical imbalance in their brain. I've read a lot of literature on this now, and people that suffer from post-traumatic distress syndrome. Is there a space for medication? Yes, there is. But it should not be the first option. It should be the 3rd or 4th or 5th option. And then if you don't get the result, then maybe look at that as an option.
Absolutely with you. And I think a lot of psychologists now will also advocate and almost prescribe a nature pill. The nature pill, getting back out into nature. 20 minutes in nature, they say, can be the best antidepressant, opportunity to really resolve that, treat it, manage it. So there's so many things that we can do with stress management. What this actually really brings me back to is, I guess, the core values at Weight Loss Solutions Australia, and that we are really all about a holistic attitude, that having a multidisciplinary team to treat patients suffering from morbid obesity is so critical.
100%.
This is a lot more than just about weight loss. It's a lot more than just about having surgery. Surgery is just your starting point. It is step one.
It's a tool.
It is a tool, but it's an open door to giving you that opportunity to unlock so many other aspects of life that have been possibly ignored, suppressed, repressed, and just not explored to your full potential. So I guess in terms of, living life to your full potential, when you've had weight loss surgery and getting you to that point where you can succeed from a financial health and wealth point of view, excelling in your career, excelling at other aspects of life, living your best life. Having a better opportunity to be active with the family, with your parents, with your grandchildren. All of those things change.
Look, everyone that and most of the people that I've sent for you to speak to are people that in either the corporate or entrepreneurial sector. I know a large portion of your demographic is and not in a misogynistic way, but stay-at-home mums that have lost confidence in themselves, and I know you do great results with that, and then them getting their confidence back, improves their relationship with their partner or their husband or their spouse. And their children, more activeness with their children. But most of the people that I send you and the people that I advocate to are people that are obviously in the business sector. And probably the biggest thing I've seen in the change in them is that they have this limitless belief in themselves now. And I'm very clear with them that it is a tool, and obviously, it should give you the excitement and the motivation to now you've lost the first portion of your weight. Now, why don't you start training? Why don't you make it change the habitual changes and make change in your life and make those decisions? And everyone I've obviously advocated to and that you've had the chance to work with has had great success in that. Now we do things, as I mentioned before, we do things like walking meetings. Which is a great. It's a fun thing to do, and it's like, what are you doing Sunday morning? Why don't you come to my place and walk loose, and we'll go for a walk along the ocean there. And it's like it's a whole cultural shift, especially in what they're doing.
Great way to brainstorm. I think you're right. Obviously, our primary patient profile is often women more commonly than men, and I think
that's shifting.
It needs to shift because men's health issues, they're often, I guess, buried a little bit more. Or, what I see is that men are the last to actually see themselves in the mirror, see their own reflection, and understand the need to value their health and put themselves first for their families, for their careers, and for everything else. And they're often, I think, unlike you, leaving it too late. And we've seen that age shift. So that barometer has moved. Typically, even if I go back 10 years or even 20 years, patients were 40, 50 plus. Those were those kind of light bulb moments where all of a sudden they were waking up and the medical complications were already kicking in. If we can start earlier, as we did with you, you've got the rest of your life ahead of you. Don't wait till those medical issues kick in. What do you think it is with men? Why are they the last to actually recognise that they've got a problem?
And I think I was a victim of this. I think it's a lot more socially acceptable for a man to be larger. It is. It's a reality. you know, in
definitely not sexy.
It's well.
Sorry, but you know, I mean, why is it more acceptable for men to be overweight and to be accepting of themselves in that way?
Yeah, because I think a lot of men, by the time and as you said, that the only thing that is the light bulb moment generally is their health.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happens is a lot of them get through their 20s, 30s and 40s and they get their life partner or their husband or their wife, whatever it is, you know, your preference, and then they become complacent, and then that complacency kicks in, and it's not healthy from a relationship point of view because they become inactive from that. But there is a social acceptance there. Like I was a victim of this. Like I use the word victim, but I was as you mentioned, 173 kilos in previous interviews, and I still had the attention of ladies or whatever, or partners, whatever it might be.
And we talked about that in our very first conversation. That because I asked you a question around, was your weight almost like a barrier to that attraction, to having, you know, that normal social life and normal relationships, and you said to me straight away you'd always been a chick magnet no matter what, you know. So it was openly he shared that with me.
And the reality is that there is that level of complacency where I think a lot of women still don't mind if a guy's a bigger guy because they've even found the social acceptance there. And what is actually the trigger generally for a male is the health concept. So like, you know, when they get diabetes and then often it is too late. And so I certainly suffered from that from a social acceptance and a personal acceptance point of view. Mm-hmm. I think the second thing is that, and I'm making generalizations, so please no one think this is in a misogynistic way, but men are like, I've just got to like focus on making money because if I make money, once I'm married, I'll be able to provide for my family and my children. And there is still, we live in a very Western, you know, conventional culture where, you know, most families are still nuclear families, you know, and so often they're like, okay, making money is my focus and I'm just going to concentrate on doing that. And if I do that, everything else will work out. And they put their health aside because they're like, once I've made my money, then I can focus on that. But often it's too late. So they do need to make it a priority and make change.
100%. Yeah. Let's just fast forward. If we can imagine yourself sitting in this chair 10 years from now, where is Andrew Morello going to be and what are we going to see?
Yeah, so probably the shift for me has been obviously, you know, living a more active and adventurous life. So like I watched a documentary on an architect who travels the world now and he does adventure trips and gets his inspiration from his adventure trips for his architecture. So like, you know, caves and colours and things of that nature. And I think more and more, as you know, my philanthropic side is more and more important to me. Yeah. So I you know, there's, you know, in 10 years time, we hope we've ticked off, you know, at this point we've ticked off Mount Kinabalu in Borneo, we've ticked off Kokoda, but we'd like to be ticking off, you know, over the next 10 years, you know, Everest, you know, Machu Picchu, you know, there's a number of different treks I'd like to do. I don't remember the exact name, the one in South America that goes for 600-700 kilometres that you do over a period of time. There's one along the American border which you can walk as well. So like these are the sorts of things I'd like to do. One, bringing my philanthropic work into those, and 10 years from now, like at 42, 43, I want to be, you know, really focusing on that. Like I would hope that, you know, now with this new zest for life that I've got the financial security, what, you know, I'd hope that I have that now, but the financial security to step away from my businesses and deleverage myself out of my businesses so then I can then focus on my philanthropic work and living an adventure and active life. And then one day having children and taking them on those journeys, you know. Like I did Kokoda in 7 days, but there's a great way you can do it with your children if anyone's watching this. If you really want something exciting, get the surgery or get on top of your weight management, and then what I would recommend is you can actually do it with your children over like a sort of a 12, 15-day trip. So it is a trip that's something you can do with your kids. And if you're an Australian watching this, then I think it's a rite of passage. I think as an Australian to go over to Kokoda and see what our Australian soldiers did in order to keep the sovereignty of this nation, if you were to do that with your children, it would give them a major perspective on life.
What an incredible insight, and I can't wait to be sitting here 10 years from now having this conversation and seeing where we're both at.
We'll probably be somewhere together. I'm sure we'll do some adventure together, Felicity. So,
looking forward to the next 10 years, and thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining the Wellness Warriors podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you online with us. If you enjoyed the series, please leave your review, subscribe and follow, and we look forward to sharing many more stories with you in the future.